The Chimera is a legendary monster, a fire-breathing fusion of lion, goat, and serpent. But what about its lesser-known sibling? Lurking in the sacred groves of ancient Thebes was another terror, the Ismenian Dragon. By the end of this story, you will understand how this serpent's death gave birth to an entire city's destiny and a curse of violence that echoed for generations. Why was a dragon chosen to guard a holy spring, and what happened when a hero dared to sow its teeth like seeds? Which mythical creature do you think holds the deeper truth about the price of founding a civilization? Their terrifying nature was no accident of creation. The Chimera and the Ismenian dragon shared a pedigree of pure chaos, born from the most formidable union in all of Greek mythology. Their father was Typhon, a storm giant so immense his head brushed the stars, and whose very breath was a hurricane. Their mother was Echidna, the mother of all monsters, a being who was half beautiful woman and half enormous speckled serpent. This was the ultimate family business of terror, and their children were its most infamous executives. Alongside the fire-breathing Chimera and the guardian dragon of Thebes, this dreadful brood included Cerberus, the three-headed hound who forever guards the gates of the underworld. There was the Lernaean Hydra, the many-headed serpent whose very blood was a poison, and the Sphinx, the riddling creature who devoured those who failed her. And let us not forget the Nemean lion, a beast with an impenetrable golden hide. Each sibling was a unique catastrophe, a specialized form of divine punishment or a guardian of sacred, forbidden spaces. The Ismenian dragon was not some random serpent, but a card-carrying member of this elite, monstrous pantheon. Its purpose at the spring was not a random posting, but a deliberate assignment, a reflection of its lineage's role as enforcers of cosmic boundaries. Understanding this family tree transforms the dragon from a simple obstacle into a symbol. It was a piece of a much larger, more terrifying order. The Ismenian dragon did not choose its lair by chance. It was coiled at the very heart of a city destined for greatness and tragedy, the legendary city of Thebes. Nestled in the fertile plains of Boeotia, Thebes was a powerhouse of myth, a place where gods and mortals collided with spectacular consequences. Its very foundation was a story of divine instruction and desperate search. The city's mythical founder, a prince named Cadmus, had been sent on a quest to find his kidnapped sister, Europa. After a long and fruitless journey, an oracle told him to abandon his search and instead follow a special cow. Where the cow lay down from exhaustion, he was to build a city. That cow led him to the future site of Thebes, but before he could lay a single stone, Cadmus needed to make a sacrifice to the goddess Athena, and for that he needed pure water. This need drew him to a particular lush grove, the home of the Ismenian Spring. In the ancient world, a spring was far more than a source of water. It was a direct line to the divine, a place where the earth itself whispered secrets. Springs were often sites of oracles, like the famous oracle at Delphi. Water bubbling from deep underground was seen as a gift from the gods, a conduit for prophecy and purification. To guard such a place was not a menial job, it was a sacred commission of the highest order. The Ismenian dragon was not merely a monster blocking a resource, it was the appointed warden of a holy site, a serpentine priest ensuring that only the worthy, or perhaps only the divinely sanctioned, could access its power. This context transforms the coming confrontation from a simple monster slaying into a profound act of sacrilege, or perhaps of destiny forcefully claiming its due. This sacred spring, however, was not undefended. The Ismenian dragon was its eternal sentinel, a creature whose origins are as murky and deep as the waters it guarded. Ancient storytellers offered two compelling versions of its birth. In one, the dragon was a direct instrument of the gods, specifically Ares, the volatile god of war. This spring was sacred to him, a source of divine power in the mortal realm. Who better to protect a war god's holy site than a monstrous, lethal serpent, placed there by Ares himself as a living, breathing security system? The dragon's violence was not mindless but a divine mandate, its fangs an extension of Ares' own brutal will. The other tradition suggests an even more primal origin. Some said the dragon was not placed but born, a spontaneous offspring of the land of Thebes itself. In this view, the serpent emerged directly from the earth, a raw, chthonic spirit given form, making it not just a guardian of the spring, but its literal embodiment, a piece of the territory's soul made flesh and scale. This version ties the creature's fate inextricably to the land's destiny, a symbol that could not be removed without profound consequence. Physically, this was no ordinary snake. It was a draken, a term that evokes something far more monstrous and archaic. Descriptions paint it as colossal, possibly multi-headed like its sibling the Hydra, with a crest or horns adorning its head, giving it a regal, demonic crown. Its eyes likely held an ancient, intelligent malice, and its body, thick as a tree trunk, was capable of crushing a man with ease or spewing venom, not fire. This was an otherworldly terror, a relic from the age before gods neatly ordered the world, a piece of primordial chaos stationed at the very spot where a new, ordered city was meant to rise. So when Cadmus approached that tranquil grove, water jar in hand, he was walking toward more than a beast. He was stepping into a clash of eras, facing a guardian that represented the wild, old world that his new city was destined to overwrite. Cadmus stood at the edge of the grove, the water jar feeling suddenly trivial in his hands. The Ismenian dragon was not waiting to attack, it was simply present, a coiled monument to its sacred duty. Its purpose was not random violence but protection. This creature served as a divine filter, ensuring the spring's purity remained inviolate. In a world where gods communicated through nature, a sacred spring was a telephone line to Olympus, a place for receiving visions, blessings, and prophecies. Letting just anyone drink from it would be like letting a stranger interrupt a private conversation between a king and his oracle. The dragon was there to enforce that privacy, to guarantee that only those with a rightful claim, those sanctioned by fate or the gods themselves, could access that potent power. It was protecting a secret, yes, but the secret was the water's sanctity itself. This sets the Ismenian dragon apart from its infamous sibling, the Chimera. The Chimera was chaos incarnate, a roaming engine of destruction with no fixed purpose beyond spreading terror. It was fire and random death. The Ismenian dragon, however, had a defined post, a sacred geography. Its violence had a boundary, limited to the grove it was sworn to guard. There was an almost honorable, if terrifying, logic to its existence. It was a part of the cosmic order, a necessary checkpoint on the path to founding a divinely approved city. Where the Chimera represented nature's untamed, destructive fury, the Ismenian dragon represented nature's sacred, guarded mystery. One was a wildfire, the other a locked temple. This distinction makes the coming conflict even more profound. To slay the Chimera was to erase a blight. To slay the Ismenian dragon was to dismantle a system, to pick a divine lock, and to forever alter the relationship between this place and the powers that watched over it. Cadmus was not just fighting a beast, he was challenging the very rules of access to the divine. Cadmus carried a burden heavier than any water jar. He was not a wandering adventurer, but a prince on a mission of familial duty, the son of Echidna, king of Phoenicia. His true quest was not to found a city, but to rescue his sister, Europa. The story begins with a breathtaking act of divine deception. Zeus, king of the gods, had been captivated by Europa's beauty. Transforming himself into a magnificent, gentle white bull, he approached her on the seashore. Enchanted, she climbed onto his back, and in an instant he charged into the sea, carrying her across the waves to the distant island of Crete. To Echidna, this was not a myth, it was a parent's nightmare. His daughter had vanished, seemingly kidnapped by a wild animal. In his grief and fury, the king commanded his sons, including Cadmus, to scour the earth and find her, forbidding them from ever returning home unless they brought Europa with them. This was an impossible, heartbreaking order. How do you find a girl taken by a god? Cadmus searched for years, crossing lands and seas, but Europa was hidden by divine will, forever beyond his reach. Exhausted and desperate for guidance, he finally journeyed to the most famous source of wisdom in the ancient world, the oracle at Delphi. He asked the priestess where he might find his sister. The oracle's response was famously cryptic and life-altering. She told him to abandon his search entirely. Europa's fate, she said, was now in the hands of the gods. Instead, Cadmus was to go forth from the sanctuary and follow a particular cow he would encounter. He was to wander wherever it led, and where the cow finally laid down from exhaustion, he was to build a great city. Imagine the mix of relief and profound disorientation. His lifelong mission was cancelled by a divine edict, replaced with a new, utterly bizarre purpose. He left Delphi, and just as prophesied, he saw a cow marked with special symbols on its flanks. With nothing else to guide him, he followed the patient animal across the Greek countryside, a prince turned humble herdsman. The cow walked on and on, through valleys and over hills, until at last, in a wide, fertile plain, its strength gave out. It folded its legs and settled onto the grass. This was the place. Looking around at the empty landscape, Cadmus knew his years of searching were over. Here he would build the citadel of Thebes, but first he needed to give thanks to the gods who had guided him, and to purify himself and his companions for the founding ritual. That need for sacred water is what led his steps toward the deceptively peaceful grove, toward the rustle of scales that was not the wind, and toward the ancient guardian whose duty was about to collide with a hero's destiny. The cow's rest had marked the spot, but the city could not rise without divine approval. Cadmus knew the next step was a sacrifice to Athena, goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare, to bless this new foundation. He ordered his companions, the loyal men who had followed him across the sea, to take a ceremonial jar and fetch pure water from the nearby spring they could see glinting through the trees. It should have been a simple, reverent task. The grove of the Ismenian Spring was a place of profound quiet, sunlight filtering through ancient oaks to dapple the mossy ground. At its heart, the water bubbled up crystal clear into a stone basin, a perfect mirror of the sky. To the weary travelers, it looked like salvation, but they were not the only ones watching the water's perfect surface. From the shadows of a great rock, from the deep hollow where the spring's source whispered up from the earth, a presence stirred. The Ismenian dragon uncoiled with a sound like sliding stones. Its great head, crowned with a bony crest, rose above the water, its eyes, pools of ancient gold, fixed on the intruders. There was no malice in that gaze, only a cold, absolute purpose. This was its temple. These men, with their jar and their foreign scent, were violators. It did not roar or breathe fire. Its attack was a silent, terrifying surge of muscle and scale, a wave of primordial force crashing over the first man to reach the water's edge. Fangs dripping with venom longer than daggers found their mark. The dragon's body, thick as a ship's mast, whipped around, crushing another companion against the trunk of an oak with a sickening finality. This was not a battle, it was an execution. The dragon moved with the dreadful efficiency of a natural disaster, a guardian erasing a stain upon its sacred ground. Within moments, the tranquil grove was a charnel house. The clear water of the spring ran red, and the only sound was the heavy, satisfied hiss of the serpent as it slid back to its post, its duty fulfilled. Cadmus, waiting at the future city's site, felt the silence from the grove grow heavy and wrong. His gratitude to the gods was turning to ash, replaced by a dawning horror. His men were not returning, the water for the sacrifice would never come, and a new, more personal quest had just begun, born from a spring that flowed with blood. Cadmus found his men in the grove, a scene of silent horror where the sacred spring ran red. His grief was immediate and profound, but it did not crumble into despair. Instead, it hardened into a cold, singular resolve. These were not just companions, they were the last threads connecting him to his old life, his homeland, his failed quest. Their deaths demanded an answer, and that answer would be written in the blood of the guardian who had slain them. This was no longer just about water for a sacrifice. It was about vengeance, honor, and the brutal truth that a city cannot be founded on peace alone. Sometimes a civilization must be carved from the belly of the monster that guards the land. Cadmus prepared for battle with the grim focus of a prince who had nothing left to lose. He took up his spear, a fine weapon of polished bronze and seasoned ash, and hefted his shield. He was no untested youth, but a man tempered by years of arduous travel and disappointment. He approached the dragon's lair not with a reckless charge, but with the measured steps of a hunter closing on his prey. The Ismenian dragon awaited, coiled once more around the spring, its scales glistening like wet slate in the dappled light. It regarded this new intruder with that same ancient, dispassionate gaze. The first clash was a brutal lesson in scale. Cadmus lunged, driving his spear with all his strength against the creature's flank. The point struck not flesh, but a surface like layered stone, screeching off the thick, horny scales without leaving more than a white scratch. The dragon moved, a blur of muscle, its tail lashing out like a falling tree. Cadmus barely raised his shield in time, the impact sending shockwaves up his arm and throwing him backward into the dirt. He rolled, avoiding a strike from the massive head, fangs snapping shut on empty air where he had just been. He tried his sword next, aiming for the softer-looking underbelly as the beast reared, but each slash was deflected, each thrust turned aside. This was not a fight against a mere animal. It was a struggle against a living fortress, a being whose very body was a testament to its divine purpose. The dragon's near invulnerability was its primary weapon, slowly grinding the hero down through sheer, inexorable force. Cadmus realized, breath coming in ragged gasps, that conventional strength and courage were not enough. To defeat a creature born of earth and God, he would need a stratagem worthy of the city he sought to build, or a favor from the very powers that had placed the serpent here. The hero was not just fighting for his life, he was searching for a flaw in the universe's design. His answer came not from the sky, but from the earth itself. As Cadmus scrambled back from another crushing strike, his heel struck something immovable, a boulder half buried in the soft loam of the grove. It was no ordinary rock, but a piece of the very land the dragon was sworn to protect, a weapon provided by the territory in its own defense. In that instant, a plan crystallized with desperate clarity. He dropped his useless spear and shield, his muscles screaming as he wrapped his arms around the massive stone. With a roar that came from a place deeper than anger, he wrenched it from its ancient bed. The dragon, perhaps sensing a shift in the battle's rhythm, surged forward, its great maw gaping wide to deliver a final, venomous bite. Cadmus did not throw the stone. He used the creature's own momentum against it. As the head shot toward him, he heaved the boulder upward with every ounce of his remaining strength, driving it like a colossal hammer directly into the dragon's open jaw. The impact was a sickening crunch of bone and cartilage. A strangled hiss, more air than sound, escaped the beast. Some storytellers say a gleam of divine light, a whisper from the goddess Athena, guided that brutal blow, turning desperate strength into fated precision. The Ismenian dragon recoiled, its body convulsing in terrible, earth-shaking spasms. It thrashed among the sacred oaks, splintering trunks and churning the soft ground into mud. Its death throes were a final, violent desecration of the grove it had died to protect. As the great serpent finally stilled, its lifeblood, thick and dark, began to seep from its shattered jaw, flowing in rivulets down the stone basin and into the clear waters of the spring. The pure, divine mirror clouded over, stained a deep, ominous crimson. The guardian was slain, the hero stood victorious, but the cost was written in the polluted waters. This was no clean triumph. Cadmus had overcome a primordial power, but in doing so, he had violated a holy site and spilled the blood of a divine guardian. The path to founding Thebes was now open, but it was a path drenched in sacrilege, and the gods, particularly Ares, who had placed the dragon there, do not forget such insults. The victory was real, but it came with a curse already taking root in the blood-soaked soil. The spring's waters ran dark with the dragon's lifeblood, a grim testament to Cadmus's victory. But in the heavy silence that followed, the hero was not alone. A presence filled the shattered grove, a cool, clear light that seemed to sharpen the edges of the broken trees. It was the goddess Athena, appearing not in wrath but with the serene authority of divine strategy. She looked upon the slain guardian and the grieving prince, and she offered not condemnation but a path forward. The sacrifice to her could still be made, but it would require a deeper, more terrible ritual. She instructed Cadmus to pull the teeth from the dead dragon's jaw. Every single one, these teeth, the very instruments that had slain his men, were not to be discarded as trophies of war. They were to become the seeds of his new city's foundation. He was to take them and sow them in the freshly plowed earth of this destined plain, as a farmer would sow barley or wheat. This command was layered with profound symbolism. Athena, goddess of wisdom and civilized arts, was guiding Cadmus to transform the raw materials of death into the building blocks of life. The dragon's teeth, symbols of violence and finality, would be buried to give birth to something new. It was an alchemy of fate, turning poison into potential, ensuring that the city of Thebes would literally rise from the body of its vanquished protector. Cadmus, trusting in the goddess's wisdom, did as he was told. With grim determination, he pried each formidable tooth from the dragon's massive skull, a collection of ivory daggers that felt unnaturally heavy in his hands. He then took a plow, perhaps the very first act of cultivation on this site, and cut a deep furrow into the rich, dark soil. One by one, he placed the teeth into the wound in the earth, spacing them out, covering them over with dirt. He performed this act with the solemn care of a high priest, yet he had no idea what he was actually planting. He watered the furrow not with clear spring water, but with the only water available, the blood-tainted water from the polluted spring. The ritual was complete. The field lay quiet, a blank page. Cadmus stepped back, waiting for a sign, for a blessing, for anything to grow. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the earth began to stir, not with the gentle push of a green shoot, but with a violent, heaving motion. The soil bulged and broke in dozens of places. From each spot where a tooth was buried, something began to emerge, not plants but spear points, then helmeted heads, then armored shoulders. The field was giving birth to men, fully grown warriors clad in bronze, erupting from the soil with weapons already in their hands. These were the Spartoi, the sown men. They did not look around in wonder or gratitude. Their first act upon drawing breath was to turn on each other, their eyes blazing with instant, mindless fury. The field meant to be Thebes's cradle had become a battlefield, as the dragon's final curse sprouted from the earth in a harvest of mutual slaughter. The earth itself was giving birth to an army. Where moments before there had been only a furrow of dark soil, the ground now heaved and cracked like a broken crust. From each buried dragon's tooth, a figure erupted in a shower of dirt and stone. These were not fragile seedlings, but men, fully formed and armored for war from the very instant of their creation. They were the Spartoi, a name that means simply the sown men, and they were sown not with hope but with the dragon's final curse. Cadmus watched in frozen terror, his victory over the serpent evaporating into a new, unimaginable nightmare. He had traded a single colossal guardian for a host of born killers, each one clambering from the earth with a bronze helmet already upon his head, a round shield strapped to his arm, and a deadly spear gripped in a fist that had never known anything but the urge to fight. They did not blink in the sunlight or gasp their first breath in wonder. Their eyes, sharp and fierce, scanned the grove with the cold assessment of veteran soldiers, instantly seeking a threat. The air, once heavy with the silence of death, now rang with the clatter of bronze and the low, guttural growls of men born from violence for violence. Cadmus stood utterly alone before them, his own weapons discarded, the architect of a catastrophe he could never have foreseen. He had sown teeth and reaped warriors, and in their rising he saw the end of all his hopes, the city of Thebes strangled in its cradle before a single stone could be laid. The field erupted into a nightmare of clashing bronze and furious shouts. The Spartoi, born with the dragon's rage in their veins, saw not a founder but enemies on all sides. Their first instinct was not to serve Cadmus but to destroy each other. In that instant of pure chaos, as the sown men began their mutual slaughter, Cadmus understood the grim irony. He had traded a single guardian for an army of them, and this army was determined to annihilate itself before his eyes. He stood powerless, a spectator to the violent birth of his own doom. But the goddess Athena, who had set this terrible process in motion, did not intend for her chosen founder to be a mere casualty. As the warriors locked in combat, her voice, clear as a struck bell, cut through the din of battle. She gave Cadmus a single, simple instruction: do not join the fight, throw a stone into the midst of them. It seemed like madness, a child's trick against born killers. Yet Cadmus, with no other hope, obeyed. He snatched up a rock from the bloodied ground and hurled it into the seething mass of armored bodies. The stone struck one warrior's shield with a loud crack. In the fever pitch of their battle frenzy, the Spartoi did not see where it came from. The struck warrior wheeled around, believing the man beside him had launched the cowardly attack. A new, more personal fury ignited. Accusations flew, alliances of a second shattered, and the general melee collapsed into a dozen smaller, more vicious duels of betrayal. The Battle of the Spartoi became a perfect echo of the dragon's nature, a force of protective violence turned inward upon itself. They fought with a terrifying, earth-born strength, their spears finding gaps in bronze armor, their shouts dying into gurgles as they fell upon the soil from which they had sprung. It was a harvest of carnage, a grim reaping where the crop was warriors and the yield was corpses. The grove, already stained by the dragon's blood, was now churned into a muddy bog of gore and broken metal. One by one, the sown men fell until the deafening clash of arms faded into an awful, ringing silence. The heaving earth grew still. Of the dozens who had risen, only 5 warriors remained standing, breathing heavily amidst the wreckage of their brothers. These 5 survivors, their fury spent, finally lowered their weapons and turned their blood-smeared faces toward the man who had sown the seeds and thrown the stone. Their war was over. A new loyalty, forged in the crucible of that self-destructive battle, now began. 5 warriors stood breathing in the bloody silence. Their names were Eschon, Eudeus, Cechthonius, Hyperina, and Pelorus. These 5 survivors, their battle madness cooled, looked at Cadmus and at each other, and a new bond was formed in that moment. They were brothers not by birth, but by the shared, terrible experience of being sown and surviving the slaughter. Cadmus, the prince with a vision but no people, now had his first citizens. These 5 Spartoi became the founding aristocracy of Thebes, the original noble families from which the city's kings and heroes would later claim descent. It is a profound and unsettling irony. The very teeth of the guardian serpent, the instruments of its violence, gave rise to the human foundation of the civilization that replaced it. Thebes was not built by immigrants or gathered tribes, but literally sprouted from the body of the monster it had to destroy. This meant the city's history, its ruling class, its very identity, was forever linked to that primal act of violence. The noble bloodlines carried the echo of the dragon's rage in their heritage, a founding myth that was less about peaceful settlement and more about emerging victorious from a field of carnage. These men, born from the earth and baptized in mutual combat, brought a specific spirit to the new city. They were warriors first, their instinct shaped by conflict. They understood strength, loyalty forged in crisis, and the harsh reality that order often rises from chaos. Cadmus, with their allegiance secured, could now proceed. He performed the long-delayed sacrifice to Athena, purified the site with their help, and began the actual work of building the Chimera, the great citadel of Thebes. The city had its land, its divine sanction, and now its first and most formidable families. Yet the story does not end with the laying of foundations. The gods, particularly one who had been grievously offended, were still watching. Ares, the war god, had lost his sacred guardian. The blood of his dragon stained the spring, and the man who slew it was now prospering, building a city with an army born from its teeth. In the divine courts of Olympus, a debt of blood had been incurred, and the price would be paid not on Cadmus, but on his children and his children's children for generations to come. The dragon's blood had soaked into the earth, but its divine patron had not forgotten. Ares, the god of war, watched with cold fury as Cadmus built his city upon the corpse of a sacred guardian. In the ancient world, such an act was not simply a victory, it was a debt. Every action required a counter-action to restore the cosmic balance, a principle the Greeks called dike, meaning justice or order. You could not slay a creature placed by a god and simply walk away to enjoy your triumph. The universe demanded a price, and for Cadmus, that price was measured in years of his life. As punishment for destroying the Ismenian dragon, Ares imposed a period of servitude. The hero who would be king was forced to become a slave, bound to the very god whose wrath he had incurred. Different ancient sources debate the length of this penance. Some say it lasted for 1 great year, a complex astronomical cycle often equated to 8 ordinary years. Others state it was a full 8 years of labor. Regardless of the exact count, the meaning was clear. Cadmus's glorious feat came with a hidden cost, a long, grinding sentence that would temper his pride and complete his transformation. This was not a petty punishment, but a ritual of atonement. By serving Ares, Cadmus was acknowledging the god's ultimate authority and repaying, through his own sweat and submission, the life he had taken. It was a way to purify the land he now ruled, to drain the spiritual poison of his sacrilege from the soil of Thebes before the city could truly thrive. Imagine the scene. The founder of a great city, instead of wearing a crown and issuing decrees, would have performed the most menial, arduous tasks for Ares's priests or within a temple precinct. He might have cleaned altars, hauled wood for sacrifices, or tended to the god's sacred groves. This humbling service stripped him of his royal identity, reducing the prince to a servant. Yet, in this forced humility lay a crucial lesson for a true leader. A king who has known servitude understands the weight of command differently. He learns patience, endurance, and the value of every role within a community. This period of atonement was the final furnace in which the wandering prince was fully forged into a city founder. It taught him that founding a civilization is not just about conquest and building walls. It is about establishing a relationship with the divine, about understanding that even a king is subject to forces greater than himself. When Cadmus finally completed his servitude, he returned to Thebes not just as its victorious founder, but as its penitent and purified king. The debt was paid, the balance restored, at least for a generation. The city could now grow from a foundation that had been spiritually cleansed through its founder's suffering. But the story of Thebes is a story of cycles, and the consequences of that first violent act were not so easily buried. They were merely passed down like a cursed inheritance waiting to bloom in the lives of Cadmus's own children. The dragon's physical form was gone, but its essence had been scattered into the very fabric of Thebes. It no longer guarded a spring, it guarded the city's identity. The Ismenian dragon underwent a profound metamorphosis in the Greek imagination, shifting from a creature of flesh and scale into a powerful, recurring symbol. Its legacy was no longer its venom or its coils, but its teeth. Those ivory seeds sown by Cadmus proved to be a mythic artifact of terrifying potency. They did not vanish from storytelling after founding Thebes. Instead, they reappeared in one of the most famous quests of all, the voyage of Jason and the Argonauts. Years later, when Jason arrived in the far-off kingdom of Colchis to seize the Golden Fleece, the sorceress king Ede set him an impossible task. To prove his worth, Jason had to yoke a pair of fire-breathing bulls, plow a field with them, and then sow that field not with grain but with dragon's teeth. Where did Ede get these teeth? The myth is explicit. They were the remaining teeth from the jaw of the Ismenian dragon, a sacred relic passed down or traded among gods and kings. This was not a coincidence, it was a direct narrative thread. The same curse that Cadmus had unleashed upon his own future city was now being weaponized against a new hero. When Jason, following divine advice, threw a stone among the armed men who sprouted, he triggered the same fratricidal battle, allowing him to survive the trial. The dragon's teeth became a standardized test, a mythical trapdoor that heroes had to know how to navigate. Their recurrence tells us something crucial. The Ismenian dragon was not just a local monster for a single story. Its power was archetypal, its body parts becoming legendary objects that carried a specific, dreadful magic wherever they went. They represented a fundamental truth the Greeks understood deeply. From great violence from the body of a defeated chaos could come both destruction and the raw materials for order. The teeth were a concentrated dose of that paradox. For Thebes itself, this symbolic legacy was even more intimate. The city was literally built by men born from the dragon's body. Therefore, the dragon's nature, its role as a sacred guardian, its lethal violence, its deep connection to the earth became part of Thebes' civic character. The dragon represented the chaotic, chthonic power of the land itself, the wild force that had to be conquered and integrated for civilization to exist. Thebes' history was famously bloody, filled with fratricidal wars, tragic curses, and epic conflicts, from the story of Oedipus to the War of the Seven against Thebes. It was as if the mutual slaughter of the Spartoi was a pattern that kept replaying in the city's royal family. The dragon's essence of violent strife was woven into the city's fate. Yet at the same time, the dragon also symbolized fertile potential. Its teeth, when sown, produced men. The spring it guarded was a source of life and prophecy. The monster was not purely evil, it was a holder of potent, dualistic power. The Ismenian dragon, therefore, stands as a perfect symbol for the founding of any great endeavor. It reminds us that creation is rarely a peaceful act. To build something new, you must often confront and dismantle the old guardians, the existing structures. That process is violent and sacrilegious, and it incurs a debt. The new order that rises will forever carry within it the seeds, the teeth of that initial conflict. The potential for both greatness and self-destruction is sown together in the same furrow. So the next time you hear a story about a hero planting dragon's teeth, remember it is not just a magical trick. It is a lesson from Thebes. It is a warning that the things we slay to make room for our dreams have a way of returning, not as monsters, but as the very nature of the world we build. The story of the Ismenian dragon is not an isolated myth. It is one powerful expression of an idea that appears in cultures across the globe, an archetype that speaks to something deep within the human imagination. The dragon, in its many forms, is a universal symbol of the untamed, chaotic forces that must be confronted for civilization to arise. Look at the Lernaean Hydra, another child of Typhon and Echidna, the Ismenian dragon's own sibling. It was a multi-headed serpent that guarded an entrance to the underworld at the Spring of Lerna. Like the Theban dragon, it was a guardian of a liminal, sacred space, and its defeat by Heracles was another act of carving order from primordial chaos. Then there is Python, the great serpent that guarded the oracle at Delphi before Apollo slew it to establish his own temple there. The pattern is unmistakable. A serpentine creature protects a place of power, a spring or an oracle, and a god or hero must overcome it to institute a new divine or human order. this guardian role extends far beyond the Greek world. In Norse mythology, the dragon Nidhogg gnaws at the roots of the world tree Yggdrasil, a constant threat to cosmic stability. In the ancient Near East, tales like the Babylonian Enuma Elish describe the god Marduk battling the primordial sea dragon Tiamat to create the ordered world from her divided body. And in many Asian traditions, dragons are often powerful, wise beings associated with water and weather, yet they still represent the formidable, sometimes destructive, forces of nature that must be respected and harmonized with, not merely conquered. What ties all these diverse creatures together? They are almost always linked to the fundamental elements earth and water. They dwell in deep caves at the bottom of springs or in the cosmic sea. They guard the sources of life, prophecy, or wisdom because they are embodiments of the raw, pre-civilized world. Their defeat is never just a monster slaying. It is a foundational act. Apollo slaying Python allows for the establishment of the Delphic oracle, a center of divine order and guidance. Cadmus slaying the Ismenian dragon allows for the literal sowing of Thebes' first citizens. The dragon's death makes space for temple and city, for prophecy and law. So the Ismenian dragon is far more than a local obstacle for a wandering hero. It is Greece's specific chapter in a global story. It represents the universal challenge of turning wilderness into home, of transforming the chaotic potential of the sacred spring into the structured reality of the city-state. Every culture that tells of such a creature is wrestling with the same profound transition from the untamed world to the world humans build. The dragon is the old order, fierce and necessary in its own realm, that must fall for a new dream to take root. And as the tragic history of Thebes would soon reveal, that new dream is forever haunted by the spirit of the dragon it replaced. Cadmus returned to the site of his future city a changed man. His 8 years of servitude were not just a punishment, they were a purification. He had paid the blood debt to Ares in the only currency the gods truly accept: time and submission. With the cosmic scales rebalanced, his path to kingship was finally clear, but the reconciliation went even deeper than his completed sentence. In a stunning act of divine diplomacy, Zeus himself orchestrated a marriage. Cadmus was given Harmonia as his bride, and her parentage was nothing short of miraculous. She was the daughter of Ares, the very god he had offended, and Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. This union was a masterstroke of mythological symbolism. The marriage wove together the strands of conflict and concord, of the violence that founded the city and the harmony needed to sustain it. Cadmus, the slayer of Ares' dragon, became the son-in-law of the war god. The man who had spilled sacred blood now joined his lineage to that of the divine. It was as if the universe declared that from great strife, a deeper, more resilient peace could be forged. With Harmonia by his side, Cadmus at last laid the stones of the Chimera, the great citadel of Thebes. The city rose not in spite of the dragon's death, but because of it, and it was now sanctified by a bond that turned wrath into kinship. The founding act of violence was not erased, but it was enveloped within a larger, divine story of reconciliation. This is the profound, messy truth at the heart of Thebes' origin. Civilization is not born in a vacuum of pure goodwill. It often erupts from necessity and conflict, from the difficult, sometimes sacrilegious task of clearing space. The Ismenian dragon was that primal obstacle, yet the story does not end with its defeat. It moves through penance and into an unlikely union. The marriage to Harmonia represents the hope that even our most disruptive, necessary actions can be woven back into a stable order, that the gods themselves acknowledge the complex dance between human ambition and cosmic law. Thebes stood as a testament to this idea, a city whose walls were built on a dragon's grave, but whose first queen was named Harmony. Yet, as any student of Greek tragedy knows, a name is often a hope, not a promise. The legacy of the dragon's teeth and the blood in which they were sown was not so easily dissolved by a single wedding. It was a seed planted deep in the royal line, waiting for its season to sprout again. Harmony was the queen, but the dragon's teeth had already been sown. The marriage of Cadmus and Harmonia was a divine promise of peace, yet the city they ruled was born from a field of fratricide. That first harvest of violence, when the Spartoi turned their spears upon each other, was not a closed chapter. It was a prologue, a pattern etched into the soul of Thebes that would replay itself with horrifying precision for generations. The legacy of the Ismenian dragon was not just a founding myth, it was a curse of civil strife, a tragic cycle where the city's greatest heroes were doomed to repeat the dragon's lesson, that from its body came both life and self-destruction. This endless echo of conflict forms the core of the Theban cycle, a series of myths so dark and profound they became the bedrock of Greek tragedy. The first terrible flowering of this curse appears in the very next generation, with Cadmus and Harmonia's own children. Their daughter Semele was loved by Zeus and bore the god Dionysus, but she was tragically destroyed by her own divine ambition. Another daughter, Agave, in a frenzy induced by Dionysus, participated in the horrific dismemberment of her own son, King Pentheus, who had denied the god's divinity. The royal house was already tearing itself apart, a family consumed by madness and bloodshed that felt like a grotesque reflection of the Spartoi's mutual slaughter. But the most iconic and devastating recurrence of the dragon's curse is the story of Oedipus. His tragedy is not an isolated misfortune, it is a direct inheritance from that blood-soaked soil. Oedipus unknowingly kills his father, King Laius, at a crossroads. He then saves Thebes from the Sphinx, another monstrous guardian, and is rewarded with the throne and marriage to the widowed queen, Jocasta, who is, of course, his own mother. The horror of this revelation is personal, but its consequences are civic. The pollution of patricide and incest brings a plague upon Thebes, a sickness in the body politic that mirrors the spiritual poison of the dragon's spilled blood. When the truth comes out, Jocasta hangs herself, and Oedipus blinds himself and goes into exile. The city is left scarred and leaderless, its royal family once again obliterated by internal, self-inflicted violence. The curse does not end with Oedipus, it passes to his sons, Eteocles and Polynices. After Oedipus's fall, the two brothers agree to share the throne, ruling in alternating years. But when Eteocles' first term ends, he refuses to relinquish power. Polynices, exiled and furious, raises an army from the city of Argos to take Thebes by force. This leads to the War of the Seven against Thebes, where 7 Argive champions, including Polynices, assault the city's 7 gates. The brothers, born of the same cursed blood, meet at the gates and kill each other in single combat. They literally reenact the battle of the Spartoi, brother killing brother, their mutual destruction completing another turn of the tragic cycle. The city is saved from external conquest, but only at the cost of its last legitimate heirs dying by each other's hands. The field sown by Cadmus yields yet another harvest of familial slaughter. Even this is not the end. The next generation, the Epigoni, or the sons of the 7 champions, return a decade later to avenge their fathers. They succeed where their fathers failed, breaching the walls of Thebes and sacking the city. This final conquest breaks the power of the old Theban royal line for good. Think about that narrative arc, from Cadmus sowing the teeth to his own family's madness, to Oedipus's sin, to his son's mutual murder, to their son's final vengeance. It is one long, unbroken chain of internecine violence. The dragon's teeth did not just produce 5 survivors, they produced a template for Thebes' entire history. Every major story is about the city turning its strength inward, about loyalty fracturing, about the most intimate bonds becoming the site of the deadliest conflict. The Ismenian dragon, as a guardian of boundaries, was defeated, but in its death it unleashed a different kind of chaos, one not of a single monster but of a pattern, a karmic debt that demanded payment in familial blood over and over again. This is the profound and sobering truth of the Theban cycle. It suggests that the violence at the foundation of a civilization is not a one-time cost. It is a seed that grows into the very structure of that society. The dragon was not merely an obstacle to overcome. It was a symbol of the primal, chthonic forces that, when disturbed, demand a long and terrible reconciliation. Thebes' greatness in myth is forever shadowed by its tragedy, its heroes forever wrestling with a fate written in dragons' teeth and brothers' blood. The city's story asks us a difficult question. Can order ever truly be built upon a foundation of sacrilege and strife, or does that initial act of creation forever determine the nature of what is created? For Thebes, the answer plays out in a relentless, heartbreaking echo, a cycle where every generation seems fated to learn anew the price paid at the Ismenian Spring. The stones of ancient Thebes still whisper beneath the modern city of Thebes. While we will never unearth the skeleton of a multi-headed serpent, the myth of the Ismenian dragon is anchored in a tangible, physical place. For centuries, travelers and archaeologists have sought the actual Ismenian Spring, the sacred water source that Cadmus needed and the dragon was sworn to protect. Though its exact location is debated, several springs have been identified in the rolling hills around Thebes, places where water still bubbles up from the limestone, feeding the fertile plain. These are not just sources of water, they are time capsules. Excavations in the area have revealed evidence of ancient cult activity precisely at such springs, with votive offerings, small clay figurines, broken pottery, and coins left by worshippers over generations. These finds tell us that these sites were indeed considered holy, gateways to the divine where people sought blessings, healing, or prophecy. The dragon did not emerge from a vacuum. It grew from the human instinct to explain and personify the power of these places. A spring that occasionally flooded or whose waters were tainted by mineral deposits causing sickness could easily be seen as guarded by a capricious, dangerous spirit. The very earth around Thebes is seismically active, a land prone to tremors. What might our ancestors have thought when the ground suddenly shook near a sacred grove? Perhaps it was the stirring of a great beast coiled beneath the soil, the restless turning of the guardian. The myth transforms geological reality into narrative, giving a face and a story to the unpredictable forces of nature. But the story is also about territory. The foundational clash between Cadmus and the dragon can be read as a mythic memory of a very real historical struggle. Thebes was built in a fertile region coveted by many. The tale of a hero defeating a local guardian spirit to claim a vital water source is a powerful metaphor for the displacement of one culture by another, or the conflict between incoming settlers and the indigenous peoples who already held the land sacred. The dragon symbolizes the old order, the established spiritual claim to the place. Cadmus represents the new, the builders of the city-state, who must overcome that claim to establish their own. The dragon's teeth, then, become a symbolic weapon. They are the enduring legacy of that conflict, sewn into the land itself, ensuring that the struggle for control becomes part of the city's genetic code. So, while we smile at the idea of a literal dragon, the archaeology of Thebes asks us to listen deeper. The myth is a profound reflection on how humans navigate the world, turning the mysteries of geography, the dangers of nature, and the traumas of history into stories that define who we are and where we come from. The Ismenian dragon may not have been real, but the spring, the earthquakes, and the battles for this fertile land certainly were. The genius of the myth is how it wove those hard truths into a tale of teeth, fate, and a city forever rising from a blood-stained furrow. Its fangs and coils were not confined to myth. The Ismenian dragon slithered from oral tradition onto the very surfaces of ancient Greek life, immortalized in the vibrant art of pottery. On red figure and black figure vases from the 5th and 6th centuries before the Common Era, we can witness Cadmus' fateful encounter frozen in time. In these scenes, the hero is often depicted in a dynamic, lunging pose. his spear aimed at a serpent that is every bit as formidable as the stories describe. The dragon is rendered with careful detail, its body a powerful, sinuous line coiled around the base of a palm tree or the rocks of the spring, its head reared back, jaws agape. These were not mere illustrations, they were narratives in clay. A citizen might drink wine from a cup adorned with this scene, a daily reminder of the city's violent, sacred origin. The dragon's consistent portrayal in this medium tells us it was a cornerstone of Theban identity, a foundational story considered worthy of decoration and remembrance, its image circulating in homes and sanctuaries, keeping the memory of that primal confrontation alive in the public imagination. This visual legacy was carried forward by the power of poetry. Centuries after those vases were fired, the Roman poet Ovid, in his monumental Metamorphoses, gave the Ismenian dragon a vivid, literary second life. Ovid's talent was for sensory detail and psychological depth, and he applied it to the monster's demise. He describes the creature not just as large, but with specifics that chill the blood, mentioning its golden crest, its three-forked tongue, and teeth arranged in a triple row. When Cadmus casts his stone, Ovid focuses on the visceral impact, the crushing of the dragon's jaw, the spewing of venom mixed with blood that stains the green grass black. This was more than a recap of a myth. It was an embellishment that heightened the drama, ensuring the dragon's death was a spectacular, almost cinematic event for a new audience. Through Ovid's work, the story was preserved and amplified, transmitted through the Middle Ages and into the Renaissance, where it found fertile ground in an era obsessed with reclaiming classical wisdom and imagery. By the time of the Renaissance, the dragon had shed some of its specific Theban context to become part of a broader symbolic language. In emblem books and illustrated mythologies, Cadmus and the dragon became a standard tableau, a representation of the heroic triumph over chaos. Yet, artists and writers began to layer new meanings onto the old bones. The dragon evolved from a simple guardian into a more potent symbol of the land's untamed primal power, a force that was both destructive and necessary, a resource that had to be conquered and harnessed for civilization to flourish. This interpretation resonated deeply in an age of exploration and colonization, where new worlds were seen as wild landscapes to be tamed. The Ismenian dragon was no longer just a monster from Boeotia, it was an archetype of the wilderness itself. This archetypal power is precisely why the echo of the Ismenian dragon can be heard in the corridors of modern fantasy. While it may not be named directly, its DNA is unmistakable. Think of Smaug coiled upon the treasure of Erebor in Tolkien's Middle-earth, a possessive, ancient intelligence guarding a hoard within a mountain, much as the dragon guarded the sacred spring. Consider the dragons in George R.R. Martin's world, literally born from stone and fire to become the ultimate symbols of a dynasty's power and the terrifying cost of reclaiming a homeland. These are not mindless beasts, they are complex forces of nature, history, and magic. They are the scaled descendants of the Ismenian dragon's core idea, that certain places and powers have innate guardians, and that claiming a throne or founding a kingdom often requires a terrifying transaction with such a creature. The modern fantasy dragon, in its many forms, carries the same symbolic weight, reminding us that great power, whether a golden fleece, a royal birthright, or a city's foundation, is always protected by a formidable price. From painted vase to epic poem to fantasy novel, the Ismenian dragon's journey through art and literature reveals a fascinating evolution. It begins as a specific, local monster on a pot, becomes a vividly described antagonist in a Roman epic, transforms into a universal emblem of wild nature during the Renaissance, and finally disperses its essence into the bedrock of contemporary storytelling. Each era molds the creature to reflect its own fears and fascinations. Yet, at its core, the dragon remains what it always was for Thebes, a symbol of the profound and often violent dialogue between the old world and the new, between the chaotic power of the earth and the human desire to build something lasting upon it. Its story is never just about a hero killing a snake. It is about the indelible mark that first conquest leaves on everything that follows. Beneath the fangs and scales lies a deeper truth about ourselves. The Ismenian dragon is more than a monster in a grove. It is a mirror held up to the human psyche. From a psychological lens, this guardian serpent embodies the unconscious itself, that vast primal realm of untamed instincts, fears, and chaotic potential that exists within every individual and every culture. The sacred spring it protects is not just a source of water, but a symbol of the life-giving yet dangerous wellspring of our deepest selves. For Cadmus to found his city, his conscious ego, he could not simply ignore this spring. He had to approach it, to engage with it, and ultimately to slay its guardian. This is the classic hero's journey internalized. The confrontation with the dragon represents the necessary, terrifying work of bringing the contents of the unconscious into the light of awareness. We must face our own inner chaos, our buried traumas and wild impulses, to build a stable, coherent identity, a psychic city where the self can rule. The dragon's death is not the destruction of the unconscious, but its integration. Its teeth are sown into the earth, meaning the raw, primal energy is not discarded but planted, transformed into the building blocks of the conscious mind. The Spartoi, the armed men who fight each other, symbolize the internal conflicts that arise from this process. Establishing order within ourselves is never peaceful. It involves a constant negotiation, a battle between competing drives, values, and memories. The civil war of the sown men is the psyche's own civil war, the necessary strife that forges a functioning whole from disparate, often warring parts. Symbolically, the story expands from the individual to the collective. The dragon is the wild, untamed nature that existed before the first plow cut the first furrow. It is the forest that must be cleared, the river that must be bridged, the unpredictable storm that must be weathered. Civilization, by its very definition, is the act of drawing a line, of saying here, within these walls, we impose order on chaos. The Ismenian dragon is that chaos given form, a territorial spirit of the land that resists the human blueprint. Its defeat is the foundational act of domestication, not just of the landscape, but of the human relationship to it. Yet the myth is brutally honest about the cost. The sown men reveal that the foundations of society are not laid upon harmony, but are born from conflict. Those first 5 survivors, the noble families of Thebes, carry within them the memory of that fratricidal battle. This suggests that every social order, every law, every shared custom arises from a prior struggle, a negotiation of power that is often violent. The city's walls do not keep conflict out, they contain it, giving it a structure through which to play out. The dragon's teeth, now part of the city's foundation, ensure that the potential for internal strife is woven into the civic fabric itself. Thebes is not a city that forgets its origins. It is a city forever remembering them through tragedy. This symbolic reading asks a profound question of every culture. What dragon did we slay to build our world, and what sown men continue to battle within our institutions? The myth implies that to understand a civilization, you must look not to its glorious monuments, but to the blood in the soil beneath them, and to the unresolved conflicts that sprouted from the teeth of the first defeated guardian. Their shared bloodline makes their differences all the more striking. The Chimera and the Ismenian dragon, born of the same monstrous parents, chose utterly divergent paths in the world. The Chimera was a rogue agent, a fusion of mismatched parts that could never belong to any single place. It was a creature of pure, unnatural destruction, roaming the Lycian countryside with no purpose beyond incinerating villages and devouring livestock. Its very existence was an affront to the natural order, a walking, fire-breathing contradiction. In stark contrast, its sibling, the Ismenian dragon, was deeply rooted, a stationary guardian woven into the sacred geography of Thebes. It did not seek out conflict, it waited for conflict to come to its grove. Where the Chimera was chaos unleashed, the dragon was chaos contained, given a specific duty and a hallowed post. This fundamental difference is reflected perfectly in how each monster meets its end. Bellerophon confronts the Chimera from a place of impossible distance, soaring on the winged back of Pegasus, the divine horse. He rains down arrows or a lead-tipped spear from the safety of the sky, never truly touching the beast, never sharing its ground. It is a celestial execution, a removal of a blight from above. Cadmus, however, faces the Ismenian dragon in the mud and moss of its own domain. There is no winged escape, no aerial advantage. It is a brutal, intimate, earthbound struggle, man against serpent, strength against scale, a foundational act of violence performed on the very soil where a city must rise. One death cleanses a land of a roaming terror, the other fertilizes the land for a new beginning. The Chimera's defeat is an ending. The Ismenian dragon's defeat is a bloody, complicated genesis. That archetypal power is precisely why the echo of the Ismenian dragon can be heard in the corridors of modern fantasy. While it may not be named directly, its DNA is unmistakable. Think of Smaug coiled upon the treasure of Erebor in Tolkien's Middle-earth, a possessive, ancient intelligence guarding a hoard within a mountain, much as the dragon guarded the sacred spring. Consider the dragons in George R.R. Martin's world, literally born from stone and fire to become the ultimate symbols of a dynasty's power and the terrifying cost of reclaiming a homeland. These are not mindless beasts, they are complex forces of nature, history, and magic. They are the scaled descendants of the Ismenian dragon's core idea, that certain places and powers have innate guardians, and that claiming a throne or founding a kingdom often requires a terrifying transaction with such a creature. The modern fantasy dragon, in its many forms, carries the same symbolic weight, reminding us that great power, whether a golden fleece, a royal birthright, or a city's foundation, is always protected by a formidable price. But the legacy is not just in the guardian itself, it is in the specific, strange magic of its remains. The motif of dragon's teeth creating warriors has proven just as enduring. This is not a forgotten footnote from an old myth, it is a living trope. You can find it in the pages of Rick Riordan's popular novels, where demigods face the Spartoi as recurring enemies, warriors sprouting from the earth with a familiar, deadly purpose. It appears in role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons, where spells or magical items can conjure skeletal warriors from buried teeth, a direct homage to the Theban story. Video games, from classic titles to massive online worlds, often feature areas where players must defeat dragon-like bosses guarding crucial locations, and sometimes the reward or the next challenge involves the creature's remains yielding something unexpected and dangerous. The teeth are a perfect narrative device, a compact package of ancient magic that contains both a trial and a potential army, a gift that is also a curse. This makes the Ismenian dragon, though lesser known by name, a foundational blueprint. Its story established a template that modern storytellers instinctively understand. A sacred or valuable site needs a protector, and what is more formidable than a dragon? The hero's journey to that site is a test of courage, and the aftermath of that confrontation, the use of the dragon's body parts, introduces a second, more cunning test of wisdom. It is a three-act structure baked into a single myth. Every time a fantasy protagonist approaches a cavern holding a legendary artifact, knowing a great worm sleeps within, they are walking in Cadmus's footsteps. Every time a wizard or a king uses a dragon's scale for a shield, or its heart for a potion, or yes, its teeth to grow soldiers, they are participating in that same ancient alchemy, turning the raw material of conquered chaos into tools for their own world building. So the next time you lose yourself in a fantasy epic, pause for a moment when a dragon appears on the page or screen. Look beyond the fire and scales. Ask yourself, what is this creature truly guarding? Is it gold, or a throne, or a source of magic? And what will its death unleash? the answer will often lead you back to a spring in ancient Thebes, to a hero with a stone in his hand, and to the understanding that some stories are so powerful, they plant themselves in our imagination and grow forever. This ambiguity is the myth's enduring power. The story of the Ismenian dragon refuses to give us easy answers, forcing us to wrestle with questions as old as storytelling itself. Was the dragon inherently evil, or was it merely a dedicated guardian performing its sacred duty? Its violence was not random, it was a precise response to trespass. From its perspective, Cadmus's companions were violators defiling a holy site. In a world governed by divine law, the dragon was the enforcer. So does that make Cadmus the villain, a man who slaughtered a celestial security guard just to get a jug of water? Or was he a hero, clearing a necessary obstacle so that human civilization could take root? The myth allows for both readings, and that tension is what makes it feel so real, so reflective of our own world's complicated conflicts. We see this echoed in countless modern tales, where the monster guarding the treasure often has a legitimate claim, and the hero's quest can look an awful lot like theft. It asks us where we draw the line between rightful defense and ruthless ambition. Then there is the spring itself, the heart of the mystery. What was its true nature? Was it a source of prophetic visions, a direct line to the gods where destiny was whispered? Or was it something darker, a well of primal, chthonic power that needed to be contained? The dragon's presence suggests the waters were potent and dangerous, not for everyone. By killing the guardian, did Cadmus unlock this power for humanity, or did he permanently corrupt it, mixing its purity with serpent's blood? The fact that he then used that tainted water to sow the dragon's teeth implies a kind of necessary pollution, a blending of the sacred and the profane to create something new. The spring's ambiguity mirrors life itself, a source that can be both nourishing and perilous, clear and murky, depending on who approaches it and why. These unanswered questions transform the myth from a simple adventure into a profound meditation. The best ancient stories are not black and white battles of good versus evil. They are complex tapestries woven with threads of duty, sacrilege, destiny, and consequence. Cadmus is both a founder and a destroyer. The dragon is both a monster and a martyr. The city of Thebes is both a glorious achievement and a cursed inheritance. This lack of a clear moral is not a flaw, it is the story's greatest strength. It invites us to debate, to reflect on our own foundational acts. What sacred things have we dismantled to build our modern world? What guardians have we overthrown in the name of progress? And what unforeseen harvests have we sown with their remains? The myth of the Ismenian dragon offers no verdict, only a mirror, showing us that creation and destruction are two sides of the same deeply tarnished coin. From its monstrous birth to its sacred duty, the Ismenian dragon's journey is a dark epic of transformation. It began not as a solitary creature, but as a scion of the ultimate monstrous union, born from Typhon and Echidna into a family of legendary terrors. Its purpose was not mindless rampage, but solemn guardianship, a sacred commission to protect the prophetic waters of the Theban Spring. This duty set it apart, rooting it to a place of power, making it not a force of chaos, but a keeper of a very specific, ancient order. That order was shattered when Cadmus, a hero driven by fate and vengeance, stepped into its grove. Their battle was not a glorious duel, but an earth-bound, brutal struggle that ended with a stone driven into its jaw, its divine blood polluting the very spring it died to guard. In its death, however, the dragon achieved a strange immortality. Its teeth, sown into the earth, sprouted the Spartoi, those sown men whose mutual slaughter birthed Thebes' first noble families. This was its bizarre and lasting legacy, a curse and a gift sown into the city's foundation. The dragon's story is in essence the story of Thebes' own soul, a soul forged in violence, baptized in blood, and forever wrestling with the fratricidal strife that sprouted from that first furrow. It symbolizes the brutal truth that civilizations are rarely born from peace, but are carved from the body of the old world, inheriting both its power and its poison. So while the Chimera may be the more famous sibling, a roaring emblem of fire and fusion, the Ismenian dragon's quieter, deeper tale shows how even the other sibling in a famous monstrous family can hold a story that shapes the destiny of cities and echoes through the ages. Its guardian spirit, defeated but never truly gone, reminds us that the keepers of the old world leave long shadows. We would love to hear which mythical sibling from these ancient tales you find most fascinating. Was it the three-headed terror of the Chimera, the many-headed puzzle of the Hydra, or the guardian serpent of Thebes? Share your thoughts in the comments.